While Ukraine still makes headlines, Belarus, the country next door, has a very different claim to fame. It is hosting the World Ice Hockey Championships. Ice hockey is the favourite game of the country's president, Alexander Lukashenko. But it's all far from sweetness and light in Belarus. Not only have 2 prisoners been executed in the run-up to the contest, scores of human rights activists have been detained, and a correspondent for this programme has been deported. Sandwiched between the European Union, Ukraine and Russia, Belarus is known as Europe's last dictatorship, run by Mr. Lukashenko for the last 20 years and still Moscow's closest ally. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Jonathan Rugman, has this exclusive report.
It is a land frozen in its communist past. A nation of 10 million people, governed by the same man for the last 20 years. Belarus, personal fiefdom of Alexander Lukashenko. Vladimir Putin's kind of neighbour, one who wishes the Soviet Union still existed. A former chicken farm manager turned boat-rigging dictator.
Который там о диктатуре кричал. Я вот услышав это, подумал, лучше быть диктатором, чем голубым, конечно.
Just as well he isn't gay then, in a country where gay rights are almost non-existent, where there's no free press. But Belarus, the last country in Europe to execute its criminals by shooting them in the back of the head, has now taken to the world stage. Because the capital, Minsk, is hosting the World Championship of its president's favourite game. This was Alexander Lukashenko greeting Mr. Putin at an ice hockey rink before the Sochi Olympics. As it turned out, fellow Cold War warriors skating on thin ice before Ukraine began to crack. The Belarusian is a hockey fanatic who is said to forbid other players from bumping into him.
He's a very fit man, very big and strong, and he keeps fit by playing ice hockey a couple of times a week, apparently. Needless to say, he usually wins.
He is known as the last dictator. He is building a lot of ice hockey palaces all over the country. It's just very clear that sportsmen are coming to support his obsession.
The dictator has spent hundreds of millions of dollars welcoming the world to his police state, where any protests are brutally dispersed. And the bison, the national animal of Belarus, has been equipped with an ice hockey stick of its own. The city has been cleared of its drunks and prostitutes, its most troublesome political activists imprisoned for up to 25 days. Not that many of the visiting fans, these are Swiss, seem to know or care.
I love Belarus.
And people are really very friendly, and we thanks for that.
Yes, really. They are very nice, very friendly, very funny, very good organization. Everything is perfect here.
I took a train into Belarus to see Lukashenko's kingdom for myself. I didn't get far, because border guards ordered me off it. Something wrong with my passport, they said. While I was being deported, our cameraman kept filming, and by pretending not to know me, slipped through their net. Well, I've just arrived back in Lithuania, the closest EU country to Belarus, after Belarusian border guards escorted me off the train there and said that I was not allowed to enter the country. They said there was something on their computer system which meant that I was banned, but they didn't tell me what it was. This is despite the fact that President Lukashenko has said that journalists should be free and unrestricted to report on the ice hockey championship, to which I was accredited. Well, clearly in my case, that is complete and utter nonsense. I'd almost certainly been blacklisted by the KGB. From these, its vast headquarters, it's still an instrument of fear. This is the only former Soviet state not to have changed the KGB's name. And still presiding over it, Felix Dzerzhinsky, a local boy made bad, who in communist times had tens of thousands of political prisoners murdered. Mr. Lukashenko has told his rubber stamp parliament to allow security forces to shoot demonstrators, though he quotes Western ambassadors as saying that Belarus is just as democratic as the rest of Europe.
Они любят нашу страну, ценят ее и говорят, что здесь, в Беларуси, демократии не меньше, чем у них. Да мы сами знаем.
Yet the president's annual Independence Day parade is in a league of its own, with its drive past of his favourite farm tractors. The synchronised human flower petals choreographed to perfection. Well, almost. The odd novelty act, though, like these prancing Greek soldiers, or the president's beloved ice hockey players, reduced to wearing roller skates in the summer heat. And a familiar face to bemused Belarusians, Kolya, the son the dictator had with his personal doctor. Here he is joining high-level talks with Russia's president. Here he is presenting Mr. Putin with an ice hockey helmet. Here he is greeting other little boys and girls in his father's land of harmony and peace. And while Kolya is seen everywhere, a Belarusian actress, now in exile in London, told me the back of the president's head is not allowed to be seen at all.
Is it true that you cannot film the back of Lukashenko's head?
Yes, it's true. This is my answer to you. I don't know whether it makes sense. This is what we know.
Is it because he has a bald patch, or?
Yeah, it's a kind of very weird haircut, so it's growing from one side.
Is he paranoid?
Oh, it's for sure. That's for sure.
Lukashenko's security is very tight, partly because he doesn't trust his security, so he's got other security keeping an eye on his security. So it follows. It's disrespectful to have someone filming the back of your head, so it's not going to happen.
It was after elections in 2010 that Lukashenko faced his most serious rebellion. Tens of thousands took to the streets after the president awarded himself almost 80% of the vote. Hundreds were arrested and beaten in detention. Ales Bilyatsky, the country's leading human rights activist, was sentenced to over 4 years in jail on a charge of tax evasion. Mikolai Statkevich had run for president himself. His reward, 6 years in a labour camp on a charge of organising violent unrest. I wanted to meet their wives, who at some risk of reprisals agreed to cross into Lithuania to meet me. I asked Mrs. Statkevich when she had last seen her husband.
Я могу його бачити 2 рази на год. До этого был 1 раз на год. 2 години. Праз двойное шкло и краты. Мы размовляем по телефоне.
How is your husband being treated? Is he being tortured? What are the conditions like?
Ну, власне кажучи, Микола вельми редко розказує те, що там відбувається, коли він розуміє, що у його ніяка позиція, якою можуть скористатися супроти його. Потім спробували підсадити його у камеру чоловіка ВІЧ-інфектованого, який почав скривати вени, там залив всю камеру кров'ю.
The threat of HIV infection is part of the mental torture Belarusian prisoners face. And both these women say that allowing Lukashenko to host the World Ice Hockey Championship is another travesty of justice.
Гулять и подтримливать диктатора не варто. Не варто. Но не, я не скажу, что я разумею тех, кто приехал. Я все равно их не зразумею.
Though I was banned from Belarus, our cameraman got remarkably close to its leader, accompanied as ever by his youngest son, even sneaking in a shot of the back of his head. This annual commemoration of the defeat of the Nazis binds Belarus to Moscow more than any other event. Stalin's Red Army are still regarded as liberators after the so-called Great Patriotic War with Hitler had left over 2 million Belarusians dead. The Russians supply the gas for the eternal flame here, and cheap energy keeps this dictatorship burning brightly. Though Vladimir Putin is known to dislike Lukashenko personally, he did let him watch these war games as the Ukraine crisis worsened. Better the devil you know, perhaps, than one who might follow Ukraine's lead and attempt to defect to the West.
There isn't a tradition in the Russian Empire.
Britain's former ambassador to Belarus reckons that with Moscow's help, the dictator could stay in power for several decades more.
It's part of his backyard, Putin's backyard. Doesn't want to see Belarus going the way that the Ukraine appeared to be going some time ago.
So having a strong man in Minsk means he doesn't have to invade or threaten Belarus. It's good news for Putin.
Absolutely. I think he's thought about changing the leader in Belarus, but he hasn't been able to find anyone who is so dogmatically reliable in political terms and in terms of leadership.
And dictatorship is all many have ever known. The same man on the evening news for 20 years trying to brainwash a nation. Ruling from this new bulletproof palace, like the ice hockey championship, a gift to himself. The father figure who keeps Belarus off the slippery slope leading to the chaos of Ukraine. And ordinary Belarusians know things could be worse.
I think most Belarusian people 5 years ago thought that it's really bad situation that we have such a strong leader, quite authoritative, dictative, but such situations in Ukraine really can't happen in Belarus. They would be finished in the first day.
The West has imposed asset freezes and travel bans on Lukashenko and his inner circle. Though in their very first game in this controversial ice hockey championship, Belarus were beaten by the Americans 6-1, and that may hurt the dictator more.